It's hard to interview Mike Dyson because I know him for a long time, so I'll try not to do the inside, conversation and be more objective. But I always joke with you because I don't know if you're Jamaican, but you have like 25 books. So let's talk about what number of book is this?
Number 21.
Is it really?
Yeah, it is, number
Wow.
21.
Okay.
Thank you. And I edited another one, the one on Nas, and then I got this book with Jordan Peterson and me arguing about
Okay.
political correctness. So around 21.
So we're going to jump right into it. You said, Jay-Z, Made in America, that he is one of the greatest poets in America. You didn't say hip-hop, you said America.
Oh, yeah.
And I was like, hold up. Over Mary Baraka, Sonia Sanchez,
Not
Maya
over them.
Angelou, but
Not
I
over
mean,
them.
where would you put him in that canon?
In that company. I mean, I wouldn't put them over. I didn't, no. I mean,
Okay.
Baraka.
I'm putting words in your mouth.
Yeah, I ain't said that. But he is. He's gifted. And he's doing it to music. I mean, Baraka did some of that, but, Robert Frost, Gwendolyn Brooks, all extraordinary poets, Sonia Sanchez, Nikki Giovanni, Rita Dove. But he's doing that stuff, and he's doing it to music, right?
Okay.
You can imagine Thomas and Beulah from Rita Dove set to music. There's an intrinsic, internal dynamic of musicality in the language itself, the meter, the pace, the cadence, right, of all great poetry.
Right.
But when I say he's like in the league of Robert Frost, whose woods these are, I think I know. His house is in the village, though. He will not see me stopping here to watch his woods fill up with snow. My little horse must think it queer to stop without a farmhouse near, between the woods and frozen lake, the darkest evening of the year. God forgive me for my brash delivery, but I remember vividly what these streets did to me. Imagine me allowing you to nitpick at me, portray me like a pickaninny. So you've got placid exterior, chaotic underpinnings, a suggested and implied conclusion beginning in a matter that is presented to us in medias res, in the middle of the action. And so I think it's not overstating the case that at his best, that Jay-Z takes his rightful place among those kinds of poets.
So Edgar Allan Poe, Shakespeare, Jay-Z.
I mean, not necessarily in that order.
I
And
asked this-
Baraka and Gwendolyn Brooks and Langston Hughes and so on, yeah.
So I'm having a little fun with you on it, but I'm going to, the more serious question is this.
Right.
What is it going to take to see Jay-Z in his work as classic material, the way that we do see a Shakespeare? And is it a function of America to not see the brilliance of black folks who come from the projects, or is it a thing of just a whole different form in which he's doing? What's it going to take for him to be deemed classic?
Yeah, well, everything you just said, right? Because think about it. Melville was writing the most Shakespearean of American writers, right?
Who did Moby Dick?
Moby Dick,
Yeah.
Benito Cereno, the confidence man. And when you think about it, he's writing for Pulp Fiction, basically. He's writing in installments in the local paper, right? Anybody thought, or even the beginning of Stephen King. Now, Stephen King is a much more highly regarded now than when he began. He's a hack writer, genre writer. Stephen King is going to be seen as one of the greatest American writers ever, right? I mean, when it's said and done. Because time has a way of, bestowing virtue and removing cataracts to see clearly what's going on.
Right.
Jay-Z, is 50 years old now, but, when he's dead and gone, after he lives to be 120, we hope, people will begin to say, this genre itself deserves a kind of reconsideration.
But
Think about it. Jazz music itself was dissed.
Yeah.
Comes out, Good Housekeeping magazine in 1918 says, who put the sin in syncopation, right? They were dissing it, right? Cat houses, brothels, circulated among the less desirable members of society. Now you got to put a suit on, maybe even a tuxedo, and go hear it at the Kennedy Center.
Right.
So, maybe 30 years from now, the Magnum Snoopus will be performed, falling back on that ass with a hellified gangster lean. Maybe E40's Sweet will be out there. You
But
know?
it's funny because, I mean, everybody from Du Bois to Adam Clayton Powell dissed jazz, you know? And so the question becomes, is what Jay-Z doing an embarrassment to black folks who came up during a certain time? Or is he something that you put your chest out and say, yeah, he did the damn thing, this is us?
Right.
You know, forget about outside society. They're always
Right.
going to demonize, but it's the internal debate that we have.
Yeah, it's a great point, and it's both, as you know. You're a college professor and one of the most brilliant intellectuals we have on hip-hop and other things. So there is a segment of society, the political correctness, the respectability politics, and I don't want to diss them like we don't understand why they're respectable. They're respectable because people were dissing black people from the very beginning. That's why we wore our Sunday best. That's why we tried to speak the king's English to the queen's taste, because they were saying you're stupid, you're dumb, you don't dress well, you're not smart, you don't work hard. So naturally enough, we were trying to police our own boundaries to prove to white people that we could do all those things. Now, the irony is we're trying to prove our humanity to the people who deny it, who kill us,
Right.
who castrate and lynch us.
But
So we're trying to prove our
not
humanity.
doing that, or is he?
Well, what Jay-Z is doing, I think, is part of a culture. Let's be real. Hip-hop means the wrong Negroes got the microphone. Not exactly the people we thought were going to amplify our desires. Snoop Dogg, really? That's what you got? Calvin Broadus? Too Short, do you want to rap or sell coke? Brothers like me had to work for mine. What's my favorite word? Don't say it. All right. So, like, really? That's representative of us? So I think that, and now there are multiple generations, as you know more better than most, there is the feeling, there is a kind of respectability, becoming a billionaire, marrying Beyonce, having children, confessing your infidelity on an album, becoming more mature and talking about generational wealth. Yeah, but the beginning in terms of hustling and talking about crack cocaine and the political economy of crack, as Mike Davis speaks about it, yeah, there is some feeling that you're tearing us up. Even now, I get comments from people, why are you spending all that intelligence and a PhD from Princeton, you're writing about a crack dealer? Well, he's been legitimate much longer than he sold drugs.
Right.
But they can't forget the fact that he began selling drugs. Well, a lot of American families who are now political powerhouses started in moonshine and running whiskey. So,
Right.
you know, a lot of us got dirty hands.
And if you could put on the cap for the music business, which I've been a part of, you know, for a very long time,
Right.
the secret that they don't want to talk about is that it was, you know, organized crime. You
lot
know,
of
it
that.
was drug dealers and cocaine movers and all that. So there's a legitimacy that goes on one side, like they came from the ashes and came up. But Jay-Z, he could be a billionaire, but he's still a crack dealer.
Still a crack dealer, still you're dealing with this pathological nihilistic kid and so on. I mean, as if what he did has defined who he is. You know, I remember one of the first sermons I heard of T.D. Jakes when I was channel surfing, and he was not well known then. And he said, you might have done what they said you did, but you're not who they say you are, right? And so he did what they said he did, but he ain't who they say he is, because he has evolved. He has expanded his understanding of the world. And when I say he's a great poet, I dare anybody to read his lyrics. I dare anybody to listen to that level of dense allusion, braggadocio, metonymy, metaphor, simile, analogy, double, triple, quadruple entendre, enjambment, right? And doing it without writing it down, right? Homer could neither read nor write, but nobody would call him illiterate. Doing it without writing it down, keeping pace and beat, and doing it into a microphone on the spot. I mean, it's pretty remarkable.
So as an MC, once upon a time, you know, there's a little illusion that goes on, which is, you know, when I was doing my thing back in the days, you memorized rhymes, you always had it, so when you came before an audience, you spit.
Right.
It's like, wow, you just did it off the dome. But it's, no, I've been thinking about this for
Of
30
course.
days. And I knew that about Jay, so I always felt like, when I seen him, it's like, man, I know what you're doing, because you know that you ain't fooling us. But what I didn't know, which you brought out, was that he would start he would track a song doing mumble. He would mumble.
Oh, of
Talk
course.
a little bit about that, because now that was something I didn't know.
Yeah, you know, you're sitting there like, David D. And then you're sitting there trying to figure the words, to finger them rhetorically, imaginatively, trying to construct a sentence into a couplet into, these bars, into a song. Somebody might give you, Kanye might come with the refrain, and then you got to figure it out standing there. And if you watch Fade to Black, you'll see some of this. But that mumbling, right, that both Pharrell, talked about and told me that process, it gave me new appreciation for some of the mumble rappers, although it's a far different art, right? Because there's a difference between Jay going, all right, turn my mic up, turn that down, and then you go, I would write it if y'all could get it, but being intricate will get your wood critics on the internet. They're like, you should spit it. I'm like, you should buy it. That's good business. All right? So from the mumble emerges a clearly articulate phrase that is consumed by every hearer. Now with mumble rap, it could be, hold on. You know what I'm saying? No, not really. Only part I got of that, walk it like you're talking. Hey, Now,
But to
and I love mumble rap,
Yeah.
by the way,
because
because it's the blues, it's the
having
moaning, it's the
having
grief.
teach a lot of folks who quote unquote listen to that, there's meaning in depth into what they're saying.
Well, that's what I was just about to
they
say.
pick up stuff and maybe we're not supposed to pick it up at our age.
And that's a great point,
Yeah,
but it's deliberately obscured,
yeah,
right? Because when you could hear us, you still killed us in the streets. You still murdered our reputations. You still relegated us to the heap bin of humanity when we were clear, standing by the speaker. Suddenly I had a fever. Was it me or either? Summer Madness by Rakim. So you dissed us then. So now, being a Baptist preacher, right? And I know Reverend Adriette Earl is here tonight from Heart and Soul, that great church here in Oakland. So the thing is, being a preacher, when the Bible says God will interpret your groans and utterances, I think there's a theological dimension of mumble rap without trying to overinterpret it.
You feel
There's
it.
a kind of grief of blues. It's the blues the same way. It's the passion. It's the cadence. It's the, as you said, communicating one to another by keeping the outside world out of it too.
yeah. You're not supposed to know what an 18-year-old is saying.
Not at all. But it's my job to teach them, so I got to figure something out. It's hard.
Yeah. Both our jobs.
I know.
So let me ask you this. You mentioned preaching, and how much of Jay-Z's delivery is rooted in the tradition of preaching in terms of it's not what you say, it's what I'm feeling?
Right.
Let's talk a little bit about that.
Yeah.
And for folks who, if you never emceed, just a little bit of background. There are moments when you are flowing, where everything slows down and you can see words and you literally feel like you could twist them, and it's like you're in another state. Some people, I came up with like zoning. Some people would say it's struck, but it's very similar to what I see singers do in church.
Right.
But with Jay-Z, how, from your teaching the class, how much of that is rooted in this whole thing of connecting to a higher source?
Yeah, no, it's a great point. And it's a kind of oral tradition that depends upon these mnemonic devices that are also aesthetic creations, right? They can serve multiple utilities. They can multiple functions. It can be served, it can serve you as a way of putting it in a pocket in your mind. Jay talks about being on a street corner, he's doing crack, but he's got to remember this line. Oh, I can't get to my paper, so I got to figure out a trick to remember what I was saying. First line, then the second line, then I start doing a whole verse, then I start doing a whole song.
Right.
So those mnemonic devices generated by an oral culture, but also, as you say, like a basketball player in the zone. The basket was like a big ocean and I couldn't miss, right? So rhetorically, you're flowing, or like a preacher when you get going and the spirit takes over. But I think the mistake people make, your point is absolutely right. The feeling, the intensity of the pathos, the emotion is critical, but it doesn't mean that it doesn't have significance and substance. It means that the feeling itself dictates the outline of what you're saying, the anatomy of your rhetoric, but it still has tremendous substance, right?
Right.
And so a lot of people think with black preaching and black art, oh, it's a concentration on what is being said, how it's being said, and not what's being said. Now, it is true, style is critical. But Michael Jordan had style too, but he still scored a bunch more points than anybody else. He could put the ball through his legs, or Steph Curry, we're in San Francisco.
Show some respect for Steph. There you go.
Right. Used to be a great team. Here. Oh, how the
Hey,
mighty
lock the
have
doors,
fallen.
lock the doors, lock the doors.
That's what you get when you leave Oakland and come to San Fran. Gentrification's ills manifest themselves on the basketball court. But you know, when you get in that zone and you're hitting those threes and the rhythm, because well, as with anything else, writing, jump shots, speaking, it's rhythm, right? I don't know about you, because you're a great writer. I sit out, you know, when your rhythm is interrupted, it interrupts your whole flow.
Yeah.
Like there's some days I get up, I know I ain't saying nothing today, I ain't gonna try. I'm gonna go watch The Godfather again, but I'm not gonna write today. But then you get up, on some days you know the rhythm, you know, because you got to sit down, and I got to go 12, 13 hours, and it's repetition, and it's, you know, going at it again. And the best writer is a rewriter.
Right.
And I think the same thing with speaking. So yes, there is an oratorical dimension. There's a preacherly dimension. There's a kind of theology of mnemonics, a remembrance for broader purposes. And I think Jay has brilliantly tapped into that along with many others.
So 2 questions, and then we'll move on. As a preacher, do you write down your sermons and, you know, have that before you do it, or is it really coming from what's inside? That would be 1. And 2, if you look at the history of music, there was a lot of upsetness that, you know, the Ray Charleses and Sam Cookes and others came out of the church and brought those aesthetics and put them into secular music.
Yep.
And they felt like, you know, you're compromising something that is really God-centered. So are we with this with Jay?
Yeah, that's
is he robbing from the church, or is he something brand new?
You're such a unique interviewer. Yeah, that's that's just great stuff, man. Yeah, number one, you know, I've been preaching for 40 years. So, of course, in the beginning, you know, my pastor modeled for me, Dr. Frederick Sampson, one of the greatest preachers in America. And I would say one of the greatest black preachers, but that's redundant. Greatest black preacher is the greatest American preacher, right? Paul Tillich, the great German theologian, said, I reserve for German theology a place of priority. So to say it's a great German theologian, to say it's a great theologian of the world. So ain't nobody preaching like black people to me, right, at their best. So my minister would preach always without notes. I thought that's just what you did. I just thought that's how it went. But now you wrote it down. I would write it down. I would write the entire sermon, or I write an extended outline. I would write a map of where I wanted to go rhetorically, which I still do today. Sometimes I write the entire thing, but I rarely, if ever, bring the notes into the pulpit because I want the give and take. Now, the illusion is you're just coming up with it on the spot.
Right.
But the point is, you know, you got your cues, your set pieces. Martin Luther King Jr. would have set pieces, but you would riff off of it like a jazz musician.
Okay.
You'd have a set piece. You'd go into the studio. So, you know, in 1959, when Coltrane goes in there with Miles Davis, he sketched out what's going on with Kinda Blue. But then you can improvise off of the sketched out chords and changes and so on. Same thing with rhetoric, and I think the same thing with preaching, you know, for those who do that style at its best. In terms of Jay, that's a great point. You know, Ray Charles, Sam Cooke. Remember, Sam Cooke was singing about touching the hem of his garment? Mm-hmm. And then he started singing, Darling, You Send Me, and women tried to touch the hem of his pants. There was a shift from the sacred to the secular, or as many black church people say, circular.
Right.
Which I always find interesting because it is circular, not beginning or end. So there was a lot of, as you said, upsetness, a lot of anger, a lot of hostility. But, you know, they paved the path for Aretha Franklin, but Aretha Franklin caught some of that grub too. Here you are singing about never grow old, and then you sing never met a man the way that loves me the way that I love you, right? So there is some of that with Jay, but he wasn't reared explicitly in the church in those traditions. So in one sense, there's a kind of secular oral tradition that inevitably still borrows from religious identity and religious culture, right?
Right.
The fact that you're with a microphone, being amplified, talking about things. Jay has a line, I'm from the place where the church is the flakiest. Brothers been praying to God so long that they atheists.
But,
Right.
but the
Right.
reason why I ask this
Right.
is because Jay may not have been in a Baptist church, but he comes up at a time with Jazzo, and he's exposed to the 5%, now the nations
All
of
of
gods
that.
and earth.
All of
And
that.
some of the best MCs have come from that tradition
There's
where
no doubt.
wordplay is,
There's
paramount.
no doubt. That's a great point. No, and he is definitely the legatee of that. He is definitely, and early on, I mean, you can still hear it in some of his rhetoric
Right.
about some of that 5%. If he gets with, what's my man that he signed, Jay Electronica,
Okay.
and so on. When you hear, whether it's the 5% straight up Nation of Islam, you can hear, my old earth, you can hear some of those references, but the word patterns, the speech intonations, and Jay would be a more laid back preacher, right? Busta Rhymes would be like a hooper.
Yeah.
Yeah, Lord. Busta Rhymes, rah!
Yeah, you never
know.
hear Jay sing when he raps. He doesn't go into that sing-song cadence, the one that Drake supposedly invented, even though we've been doing that forever.
Yeah, but that's like saying that Lou Rawls invented rap. It's true, but not really.
Yeah.
What Drake has done is different, I would argue. I know a lot of people argue that, and you're right. A lot of people have done it way before Drake, but not the way Drake does it right now, and not with the unique combination, the peculiar, because he's breaking out the song even within the verse of a song, even within the same sentence, even within the same word.
Right, right.
I mean, there's something that he's adding to that tradition. Although you're so right, the tradition upon which he builds has been obscured, and people don't know about it.
And preachers always did that too.
That's what we
just you're
do.
rapping, and then next thing you know, so.
Oh yeah. Well, you go into at the funeral of one of the greatest preachers ever, Gardner Taylor. He said, upon listening to another preacher, you never knew whether it was speech half sung or singing half spoken, right? And then, because you start off, I mean, one of the great ones, a guy named Caesar Clark,
Right.
Right. He's old man. He start off, I want to talk tonight about Elijah is us. And then he get to the second gear. Then he get to the third gear. You better not fight the Lord around. Because if you try to fight the Lord around, the winds will eat you. And then you had Aretha's daddy. You don't hear me. Right? So there's different intonalities
Right.
and intonations to what is the chanted sermon and the spoken and hooped word.
Okay, I'm glad you, and I'm being intentional by connecting,
Right.
this thing with the oratorical tradition of preachers
Yes.
into what Jay-Z's doing. And just to kind of give you a little backdrop, there are books written by police that are about this thick, and they're very clear. They look at the oratorical tradition and start connecting it all the way back to, the oral traditions that we do. So obviously, those folks kind of understand there's something else going on. There's a spirit.
That's right.
And also, one other thing, he does talk about Drake in the book, so we're not off topic.
Right.
But you divide the book into three parts. You talk about the hustle, you talk about the poet, you talk about his politics. And I was enamored with your take on the hustle. Yeah, I mean, you spent a great deal of time, and I wondered, first explain that, and then I wondered if you titled it Made in America because hustle is such a big part of what we're doing. And, maybe you could break down how you really analyze the whole aspect of hustling.
No, it's a great point. I'm taking you on the road with me everywhere. That's just what I did. And, the great conservative historian, Walter McDougall, Pulitzer Prize winner, wrote a book, Freedom Just Around the Corner, where he makes the argument that hustling is the central motif of American history. Now, Jay came to that on his own, right? So he didn't go to school. He didn't go to University of Pennsylvania and study with McDougall. This is what he observed on the street, because his magnificent obsession is hustling at every level. And the ingenuity with which he diversifies his expression of hustle, I think is interesting and compelling. So yes, the reason I spend a lot of time on it is because if it is the quintessential expression of the American character, then it's the good and bad meaning of hustle. The bad meaning, the scofflaws, the people trying to rip you off, the con men, and so on. but also the edifying sense of hustle.
Yeah.
On your job, on your grind, like you got 3 or 4 or 5 different jobs, different streams of income, trying to maximize your existence, trying to leverage your talent and do multiple things, always looking for the next deal, the next scheme, the next invention, the next creation. What can we do to hype it up? So in that sense, you know, I talk about Jay as a quintessential American because he's a quintessential hustler, although black hustle as a subspecies of that broader phenomenon has always been looked at askance.
Yeah.
Through a negative lens, you know, it's been seen, you know, in a way that was challenging to America, even a legitimate hustle. I spend a lot of time talking about legitimate hustle and his influence on, that is Jay, on LeBron James and on Nipsey Hussle. So when you think about black hustle, though, whether it's 1921 and Tulsa, Oklahoma, and black people creating something out of nothing, white folk get mad that we got hustle. First, they call us lazy and dumb, right? I'm talking about the dominant white supremacist culture, not all white people. Call us dumb, lazy, ineffectual, ineffective, don't work hard. Then when we, you know, and stupid and don't save your money. Then when we do all the opposite of that, real smart, go to school, save our money, pass it on to our kids, there's a lot of resentment and anger.
Yeah.
And a bomb was dropped in, you know,
Tulsa.
on those people in
Yeah.
Tulsa, Oklahoma in 1921. Y'all saw The Watchmen if you saw some of that. So the reality is that Jay-Z does represent the best and the brightest of these American traditions and the more complicated acknowledgement that the underbelly of hustling was something that he tapped into first before he flipped it and transformed it in a way that many American families have done.
So one time we had Jay at the station, and he talked about, this had to be probably about 99, 2000, and he said, you know, I'm corporate thugging. And he talked about looking at the business apparatus that exists, equating it to hustle, and then applying this corporate mentality to what he's doing. Can we talk a little bit about that? Because again, we're talking about somebody who's not in business school. We're talking about somebody who doesn't have these formal trainings, but he has the ability to really, you know, break this down, first of all, in terms that we can understand, and then execute it in ways that are better than the quote-unquote corporate models that he's supposed to have followed.
That's exactly right, brilliantly stated. And he could be teaching at the Wharton School. He could be teaching at any B school, right? I mean, the guy, because a lot of them teaching ain't got what he got. Even a guy living in public housing in D.C. right now at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue.
Oh.
Just thought I'd let y'all pick that up. Ain't got it. That's why he's lying about what he got, because he don't want to show us what he ain't got. The ultimate hustler in the negative sense of the word. So Jay, as you said, corporate thugging, and he talks about on his comeback album after he had took a small hiatus, a couple, 3 years. Kingdom Come, I think, is a tragically underrated album. And he talks about how, you know, being in that corner office and being that kind of hustler and understanding what the game was. And he flipped it. I mean, I came into the game 100,000 strong, 900 to be exact, from drug money. Started your own record company, Rockefeller, from the very beginning. Now, economic exigency and urgency forced him to do so because nobody would sign him. So nobody would sign Jay. He said, forget it, I'll do it myself.
And many of these major labels came from similar circumstances. So he's not unique in terms of taking black market money and flipping it and legitimizing it. So
no doubt about it. But as an individual black man doing that, right? Think about Master P, who did it in a different way down south, and think about Jay-Z, and many others, as you say, have done it, but not to the degree that he did it, and not with the success, and not quickly by leveraging that into other and diversifying his portfolios. If you'd have told me Jay would sell clothes, I would say you're great, right? He would talk about. So he's selling clothes, Rockaware. He's got a record company, Rockefeller Records, Rock, R-O-C, Rock, you know, Rock Cocaine. And the very name of the company is an emblem of what his own hustling, ethic was about. So, but he did all that stuff, figured out a way to monetize it, to diversify his portfolio. He's a billionaire now. Half of that is on alcohol stuff. Some of that is on $200 million from the record company that's now into Rock Nation. You know, he's got a business of sports agency,
And you also talked
television,
about-
and film division.
You also talked about his relationship with LeBron James. It's a brilliant chapter where I didn't know LeBron was soaking up game from Jay, not the other way around.
Right, right. No. He was soaking up game from Jay because Jay, you know, think about it. He's coming up. Jay is a big star.
Right.
Right. And you'll hear LeBron quote Jay quite a bit. In fact, they used to have during NBA All-Star Weekend for about 3, 4, 5 years. I went to most of them.
Two Kings.
The Two Kings, right? And I'm sure you went to them. I went to them. And they would be sitting. That's where I first met Drake and J. Cole, both, you know, there and talking to these young men and a lot of other of these rising stars. And they would have, you know, people come together and they would have serious engagement and, you know, not necessarily dialogue that was formal, but among the tables and so on. So, yeah, LeBron was soaking up. I saw him the other day quoting Jay when somebody was criticizing him. He says, if I shoot you, I'm brainless. If you shoot me, you famous. What's a brother to do? Right? And you know, I'm sure you felt that as a famous guy. People coming at you, you were like, I just want to crush
I'm not
you.
famous at all,
Right.
except to bill collectors.
No, you just want to crush them right there because you're being so nasty. Just because I'm a well-known person don't mean I don't have feelings and you saying crazy shit about me. And I just want to just get at you, but I'll try to take the higher route of the destiny and realize that if you go at them, then they'll say, look at Davey D. First of all, he's tripping. Secondly, why is he going after somebody who doesn't know anything and is not as well known as he is, and so on? Look at Kevin Durant. Like, he's got burner accounts because he wants to respond to people talking trash. And I get that impulse, but you can't do it. You just can't do it, right? So you got to remember some of Jay's lyrics. So in that level, you know, everything you need to know is in, you know, the Holy Writ, in The Godfather, and maybe in some Jay-Z lyrics, or at least in hip-hop. So it is true that when he flipped it all, he understood the mechanisms of business, of engaging where he is, and he also had a local ethic with a global consequence, right? So here's that lyric. He says, you know, he said, I thought dude's remark was rude, okay? Talking about, you know, with the Cristal.
Right.
When the Cristal said, you know, yeah, black people consume this stuff, but we ain't fans of it.
Right.
So that's how, in one sense, that led him to become a billionaire, because when he finds his own, you know, liquor, and then he leverages that and becomes a darn billionaire. If it wasn't for the racism of the cat, I'm not saying if it wasn't for the racism, he wouldn't be a billionaire, but the route he took says that that guy inspired him. So, okay, I thought dude's remark was rude, okay? He says, I know there are bigger issues in the world, I know, but I first had to take care of the world I know. So knowing the world you know, begin where you are. What do you invest in? What do you think about? What do you use? Computers, candy, software, right? And then using that as a kind of litmus test to determine the expansion of your portfolio and using, you know, hip-hop as the basis for becoming a multimillionaire and then a billionaire is quite remarkable in many ways.
So the other chapter we talked about is his poetry, and I mean, we can do a whole conversation on that for a couple of hours because you really go in deep with that, but it's politics. So he has some landmark moments. You know, he comes up under Jadzo and others, so he already is aware of cultural aesthetics along those lines.
Right.
But, you know, over his career, he's done some songs that show a vulnerability and is political, but he also runs into some road bonds. Harry Belafonte, you know, gets at him. He worked with Dream Hampton, who was part of Malcolm X grassroots movement. How much did his political centering today come from these back and forth with Harry Belafonte? How much of it came from Dream Hampton? How much of it is just stuff that him, you know, being a guy who's no longer 20, but, you know, ascending into, you know, quote unquote adulthood, just realizes that he can't be silent on key issues?
Yeah, I'm so glad you asked that because there's a misnomer about Jay in that regard. He's been political from the get-go, right? But he understood a couple things. First of all, on his first album, you know, which was very sophisticated rhetorically, right? Cashmere Thoughts, The Evils. I mean, just the wordplay is pretty phenomenal. And that was, you know, that was Biggie, that was Nas, and that was Jay, right? That was the temper of the times, as Eric Hoffer would say it. But he was like, oh, because y'all didn't really check it out to the degree that I wanted you to, so I got to now learn how to give you medicine with sugar, castor oil with honey. I got to figure out how to give you the stuff you need to get, but I got to figure out a more interesting way to do it. I got to move your behind and therefore move your brain. And he made a decision, quite conscious. But from the very beginning, the dude was speaking about serious issues. Before Dreamhampton and before Harry Belafonte, and we can speak briefly about those kerfuffles. And, you know, he was talking about this stuff on the first album about hustling. We hustle out of a sense of desperation and hopelessness and what they did politically. You know, politics as usual. Right. Politics as usual. We don't, right? He's talking about it from the get-go. Bin Laden been happening in Manhattan. Crack was anthrax back then, back when police was Al-Qaeda to black men. He's saying this stuff all along. That's before Belafonte's engagement and Dreamhampton's working closely with him. So I think that because he had to disguise it, he understood that the average consumer of hip-hop wasn't going to take in the conscious rap.
Yeah, but
and you know that.
But the before and after, from how I see it, is he started to put a lot of money into movements. I mean, sure, he was taking care.
Right.
He was taking care of people in Marcy, right? Which one day, a long time ago, they robbed my stuff in Marcy, but that's a whole other story. but he started to really put this money into a lot of things. Maybe you can lay out, you know, some of the organizations and things that he has.
Right.
But I can't see that there was no influence on those two major people.
Huge influence. I'm just saying the reason they could influence him is because the predicate was set.
Okay.
I'm saying he was receptive. Because you can be influenced on a lot of people. They're like, yeah, I don't really dig that. That's not what I do. Thanks.
Right.
The foundation was already set with him. He's very observant from the very beginning about the disparities that accrued, that obtained when it came to black people and brown people and white folk. He understood this, right? God forgive me for my brash delivery, but I remember vividly what these streets did to me. Imagine me allowing you to nitpick at me, portray me like a pickaninny, right? And if, damn though, man, I don't mean to brag, but if I don't brag, I don't say these people ain't on my ass, these white folk who are judging me, right? He's very explicit about that. Now, his engagement, obviously, with Harry Belafonte, and to be honest, when Harry Belafonte called me, I was like, I wouldn't go that route. We missed the call. He said he didn't get it. He went on and did it. Not that he would have not done it had he talked to me, but I was like, Mr. Belafonte, one of the greatest of all time. I said, Jay is doing it in a different way. Everybody can't do it your way. Your way is extremely important. Who were you mentored by? Paul Robeson. No more auction block for me. You know, when you got Paul Robeson doing it, bruh, that's a different. Soft you, a word or two before you go. I have done the state some service, and they knew it. And when you speak of me, speak of one who loved full wisely, but not too well. When you got Othello and Shakespeare walking down the street in Harlem, and he's like mentoring you, that's different than Jaz-O or some crack dealers who are mentoring you. And I'm not dissing them, because clearly they had some smarts to give him. But having said that, I think that Harry Belafonte, of course, challenged Jay-Z and Beyonce, but Jay-Z and Beyonce were doing a bunch of stuff that Harry Belafonte didn't know, but their methodology was quieter. They didn't announce what they were doing. You know, I was with a kid at Howard the other day. You know, he asked me, he says, well, if that's true, I mean, at a book event, at a debate, and he says, well, why doesn't Jay, therefore, if he's doing all the stuff you say, why doesn't he go on Instagram and post it? I was like, bro, what do people do before Instagram, dog? I mean, right? And my Bible tells me, if you tell the world what you're doing, you already done remove your celebration in heaven.
Yeah, but you know,
there's a difference.
But you're in hip hop where you tell all the other things, right? So there's a reasonable expectation that you would talk about.
He ain't told when he first went to Beyonce, he was very cool with that. He didn't talk about what they did. He didn't talk about the other women. He didn't talk about whether or not these rumors about kids. True. You're right about it in one sense, but the stuff he's bragging about, right, obscures other elements.
A lot of people followed that. You know, they followed that, you know, that model. Like, I could sell crack and then I could move on to the next thing. So I think there's a reasonable, and this is what Belafonte said, you know, let these folks know. Because and Jay-Z, by his own admission, said that he could literally sell water to the devil. You know, he's talked about his influence, right?
Right.
So there would be an expectation that he would, you know, be like, look, these are the things I'm doing and y'all need to follow suit.
Yeah, I mean, there's an argument to be made for that. There's also an argument like his style, much more laid back, much cooler, what he did. Now he did start doing that, right? Before Belafonte, when he went to give out water, right? He talked about that on Kingdom Come. when he spoke about what you're working with the UN and sat up there with Kofi Annan and so on. So there were some visible moments. It ain't like he wasn't doing anything, and that's like they didn't see. But still, he wasn't bragging about bailing out Black Lives Matter protesters. He wasn't talking about that. Dream Hampton eventually talked about that.
Right.
Beyonce wasn't talking about all the stuff she was doing, both in terms of charity and then segueing into justice, because look at what she did with the Super Bowl. She ain't said a word.
Okay,
she just
but-
performed
but
it
let's-
in a serious way.
Let's talk about the things that he's doing, because you know, it does at this moment in time, in an age of disinformation
Yes.
and deliberate distortion,
Yes.
the intentionality of what he's doing.
Right.
You talked about, you know, in the book, you lay out the work that he's done around criminal reform,
Right.
right? You talked about the editorials that he's written, the films that he's done.
Right.
Those are important. I can't just be like, nah, he's quiet. Nah, you have sold to us since 1997 that you're a hustler that came up out of Marcy Projects, you know, doing dirt, and then you
Right.
moved on up. So you got to let us know that in your moving on up, that you've also have done these things, you know, working with Meek Mill. So let's talk about those things. So
Right,
I think
right.
the average person doesn't know
Right.
all that he's done.
Yeah, no, you've named them, and I'll just add a few more. You know, Meek Mill is a young rapper from Philadelphia, 19 years old, caught a case, been on parole since then. Judges, black and white, beating up on him, basically exploiting him. He finally got that thing resolved, but Jay-Z, one of the times he went to jail and Meek became a call celeb, Jay-Z wrote an op-ed in the New York Times. Before that, he wrote one on the drug war.
Right,
And it
but
was
he
a
did a
visual
video
one.
to that.
The video with the drug war, I think, was Dream involved with
Dream
that?
was involved with that.
So with the drug war and the incredible, you know, downturn in the American economy and what that did to black and brown people, he's written about, you know, the cash bail system and the way in which it's undermining so many people. He made a documentary on Khalif Browder, who was sent to jail on that same premise, didn't have enough money to post bail, never had a trial, 3 years there, abused by both the law enforcement folk and the people who were his peers, and committed suicide shortly thereafter, not before meeting Jay. So that moved him. Trayvon Martin documentary, the Reform Alliance, where he's trying to change laws in local municipalities that reflect a much more engaged sense of what we're doing as a nation. So a lot of stuff that Jay is doing in a very serious fashion.
So the question would be, he's a grown man, 50 years old. We should expect you to do that, or should we be grateful that he moved in that direction?
We can do both. I mean, you know, you like it when your wife kisses you. You expect her to do it, but you're
Yeah.
grateful that she does. She ain't got
Okay.
to. She ain't got to. I mean, you know, you want her to. You beg her to often enough, right? But it's her own judicious character that allows her to be generous to you, right?
Okay, that's a good one.
So in that
Okay,
sense,
I
yeah,
can't
yeah,
argue with
yeah,
you on that. All right, so, I mean, there's so many other things that we could get into. I'm just going to say the book is a good read. Mr. Dyson, Dr. Dyson, goes into great detail about that hustling thing, which I think we should all read and really understand the whole thing about poetry, which we kind of touched a little bit about. He goes into great detail about that. The politics and his journey is good, and then you end off with the whole, and this will be the last one. Did he sell Colin Kaepernick out, or did he?
No, not at all. Let me tell you why. Very brief. I know people will get into it.
Yeah.
As you know, because you're an old school, serious intellectual, there's more than one way to skin a cat. Now Jay had worn a jersey, and then on Everything Is Love, he said, tell the NFL we in stadiums too, right? So he puts pressure on them. That's actual pressure. Because when other people like Jay-Z, well, let's call him, all right? Since he's challenging us, let's talk to him. Now, Jesse Jackson, Al Sharpton, you know, other figures, leaders outside, pressuring, protests. You're not doing right. Well, teach us how to do right. Come inside, let's talk. A lot of people may disagree with that, but it is an established civil rights methodology. So Jay goes in to talk. He ends up pressuring them. Now, if you look at Stephen A. Smith's show today, he was interviewed, I think, on one of these hip-hop podcasts, and he's given even more detail where Jay was like to Roger Goodell, no. We have to give this man a trial. No, not for my reputation alone, because we had to do more than give him a trial. We got to make sure that we address the situation that he's talking about, because Jay was down with that. Now, Colin Kaepernick was trying to what? Highlight racial oppression. He was trying to highlight inequality. And he's an iconic figure. In my last 3 books, I have defended him and will continue to do so. However, when his compatriot, Eric Reed, said that Malcolm Jenkins, a ball player for the Philadelphia Eagles, who sat down with the owners, who had cue cards. You remember that famous press conference? He said, I'm tired of talking to y'all because y'all not getting it. It's about racial injustice, and he held them up, and he did that. Malcolm Jenkins took formed the Players Coalition, and they received $89 million from the NFL owners to address local issues, stand your ground laws. How do you get young people who are being treated as adults treated as children? How do we challenge the distribution of wealth such that on local levels it has a deleterious impact on young people? In other words, for criminal justice. In other words, they were doing the work Colin was talking about, right? Taking a knee is one thing. Now, it could have been clumsily stated.
But Colin was also doing the work with the Know Your Rights.
He did the rights camp, but I'm talking about they're challenging laws. I'm saying they're going into local municipalities with judges and attorneys. I'm not saying that's my point. It's not either or.
Right.
It's both and. So why crap on the people who are doing the stuff on the inside that Malcolm Jenkins is doing or Jay-Z decided to do as opposed to what Colin is doing? I think we need both. And I'm going to tell you what else that's unpopular. There ain't been no real critique of our brother Colin Kaepernick. This is what I mean by critique. I don't mean judgment of him because he's an amazing guy. But even if you're an amazing guy, you could have somebody say, hey, let me help you with your strategy, right? Given what your goals are, you tell me what your goals are, let me help you. You know, who's my man that just died from Detroit, the comedian, John Witherspoon?
Right.
You know, coordinate. You could use a brother at the crib going, where you going with that shirt? You know what I'm saying? Because there is another way. The way he did it was great. It stirred up the conscience of people who were there, who saw a Kunta Kinte shirt. How about wearing a Disney shirt? Looking like you all-American. Hey, boys and girls, how are you? Fine. And then you get in like Samson, and you destroy the edifice, and you begin to challenge what's there. I'm not saying it's the only way, but I'm saying it's a way. There are strategies. And let me get even more personal, because you are Davey D. I was at the shindig with Tyler Perry, you know, the one they had out in Atlanta. And Colin Kaepernick comes up to me. He says, brother, I want to straighten you out. Now, a lot of people are like, oh, my God, really? You're going to straighten out Dr. I ain't got no ego. Bet. Holla at your boy, right? I said, but let me tell you what you do, though. That's what I said to him. I'm telling it in public. I don't think I'm speaking out of school because he challenged me, and I ain't mad at that. I said, but this is what you do, though, bruh. I said, people pay me a lot of money to hear what I got to say. I'm giving you my advice for free, and you don't call nobody. I said, I got your number. I'll tell you when you text me, when you want me to retweet something you said, like you speaking from the mountain like Moses, as opposed to, let me push back on you. Let me say, Colin, if you do that, this is what they're going to do. Let me tell you, because you don't expect Pharaoh to give you a freedom scholarship. So you get upset that, oh, they're not fair. They ain't fair. You know this from the beginning. So you got to be strategic about what you're doing. He doesn't have that community around him. And I'm sorry, that would make a huge difference in his ability to speak back. Now, when he had to try out, he didn't give a press conference. He gave like a little speech. And then you just head out. You got to interact with people and talk to them. You might not be the one, but others could be.
But
so all I'm saying is it's not an either or, it's a both.
Right. I'm also looking at his work with like Silicon Valley Debug, who have a long history of that very stuff. So there are those folks. Whether or not it gets seen becomes a whole other thing. So I hear what you're saying.
Your point about Harry Belafonte, and your point about Jay-Z, and your point about, and it's not just whether it's seen or not. A rights camp is critical what he's doing. But these other players are doing like serious work on a local level with people who make decisions about millions of young black and brown people. Don't crap on that, right? Not him directly, but Eric Reed, his compatriot. There's a way in which, you know, the same way when Malcolm said that King was the greatest weapon the white man has ever had. Now, you're saying that while you in Harlem, Malcolm, but the fight was in Birmingham. Now, if you'd have took a bunch of Fruit of Islam down to Birmingham, and y'all whipped Bull Connor's ass, assalamu alaikum. You know what I'm saying? So you got to talk about both and, not either or.
Yeah, but you can't put Malcolm in that.
But wait a minute. But he's calling King a sellout. Can we at least say you wrong for that?
Yeah, but we also know that you're talking about somebody who supported, and we're talking about there was a lot of name calling, so to speak, from SNCC. SNCC did the same thing.
They call King a name.
Yes,
That's what they all had in common. They call him man, and then the Lord, they're dogging him and all that.
Right.
Little cancel culture of their time. You know, with the kind of, my point is, it doesn't help us. It doesn't help us because I could call you names too. That's what I mean about if you shoot me, I'm, you know, you famous. If I shoot you, I'm brainless. It ain't like I ain't got the ability to call your mama a name. I can do that too when people calling me MFs and stuff. Oh, I grew up in the streets of Detroit. This PhD is later. Okay? Later. But it does us no good. My point is cancel culture, I know we got to go, it's problematic to me. And I'm saying we defend Malcolm, as we should, because I wrote my second book on him, right. But I wrote 2 books on King. But we never say, Malcolm, you're wrong for calling my man names and viciously setting a precedent where other people call names as opposed to calling to account systems of oppression that need to be addressed. And all groups do it, but we got to learn to do that too, man.
Okay. We're going to have a whole debate on King and X and every whole other thing, because there's a counter argument to that, for the record.
I ain't mad.
Okay, all right. So we got a number of people that have questions.
Yeah, so our first audience question is going to be right here in the center.
Thank you. Appreciate the subject matter. Never thought of slavery as probably the greatest American hustle, but through the conversation tonight, that's crossed my mind. Everyone in the room has I would say, skeletons in their closet, so let Belafonte, you know, and everyone else talk. Lastly, I foresee a close election. Can you give me your opinion what do you think is going to happen, Dr. Dyson, if the election's super close and somebody just says, I'm not leaving, somebody that's already there? What do you think is going to happen? Yeah,
they're going to reelect this dude. That's what's going to happen. I mean, look, when Trump said I can go into the middle of the street and kill somebody and they still reelect me, he wasn't lying. I mean, show me where he was lying. And shame on Lindsey Graham, and shame on Mitch McConnell, and shame on all you people who claim to be Americans and who claim to love your country ahead of your party. You are feckless, spineless, subservient to capital, kinds of political figures who have not elevated the ostensible commitment to truth, freedom, and democracy. I think they're shameful, and I think they're following this dude who may well, because he's mesmerized, right, some of the followers that are sticking close to him, poor working class white folk, but it ain't just working class white folk, a lot of rich white people support Donald Trump too. Come out the closet. They're there. And they're giving him millions upon millions of dollars.
Yeah, but Mike, this
But I want to finish the point after Dave. I want to finish my point.
A presidential election comes down to state by state. You know, California, he lost by 4.5 million, so that's where that 3 million
well, the
shows
electoral
up.
college.
But yeah,
he got the electoral college.
I'm talking about the popular vote.
Popular vote, he lost by 3 million, 2.9.
So which of the battleground states do you see him winning this time around?
Well, it's still probably Michigan, Wisconsin, Ohio. I mean,
you think he's going to win those?
Those states have not given up yet, right? In terms of Trump being able, maybe Pennsylvania. You know, Pennsylvania, if we flip it blue again, you know, it's very tentative. But what I'm saying overall is that the white working class that perceives Donald Trump to be its ally and its advocate will continue to reinforce that perception. And despite everything he's done to destroy it, like appointing a bunch of billionaires and multimillionaires and folk who don't give a damn about no poor people. So that, along with the Electoral College, along with the swing states, Florida's still in play. And look at, now he lost, they think, well, the Senate is a litmus test. So the last couple of races he's lost despite going down there. But you can't forget that when they impeach him, and they will, and he ain't going to get put out by the Senate because they won't, then the empathy value for him is extremely high. And this is why people got mad at Nancy Pelosi, your local homegirl here. They got mad at Nancy Pelosi for saying, slow down, Let's do it the right way. Let's at least be perceived as doing it after the facts are in. People got pissed with her, but there was logic to that. There was rhythm to her rhyme, to the rhyme, reason to her rhyme. And now I think they're in a much better position, but I'm afraid that with the kind of infighting that might end up occurring and a bunch of billionaires getting involved, that at the end of the day, whether it's Elizabeth Warren or Bernie Sanders or Uncle Joe, if he can figure his way out, or Pete Buttigieg, if he's going to, rise, because black people were not down with Obama until he won Iowa, because unbeknownst to most Americans, black people want to win too. We ain't for no symbolic
It was
candidacy.
South Carolina that they came on board. I remember that Super Tuesday.
That's where, well, yeah.
After Bob Johnson made them stupid remarks in Bill Clinton.
Bob
Yeah.
Johnson, Bill Clinton, but black people, when Iowa went down, who is this Barack Obama? Let's check this boy out. Like, who he is. Like, oh. And then John Lewis got the Holy Ghost. Remember that? The Lord told me that we must move in a different direction. So he had to leave the Clintons. It wasn't the Lord, it was your voterate who told you, and I love John Lewis, the Holy Ghost spoke through them people who were right in you saying, we're going to unelect you if you don't support our man. But at the end of the day, I think it's going to be a tight race. I think we can't do what we did last time when people told me, this is what the black left told me, my fellow black left, ain't no difference between Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump. How you like it now?
But
how
they
you
did-
like us
but
now?
they didn't
It's a
s-
huge difference.
They didn't say that in those battleground states, and we
Yeah,
were there.
oh,
we
yes,
were
they
there.
did.
We were there. In Michigan, they
I
didn't
was
say that.
right. Well, let me tell you what. They were on television telling people to vote strategically. You write, don't write, write in one person's name, or don't vote for the head of the party here, and so on. I'm telling you, people ain't that sophisticated. They're gonna be like, let me see, I put the A here, and
Right.
don't do it. You know what? That was misleading to me, and I did see the consequence of that. I just think we got to vote strategically. That's what I'm trying to say. It's gonna be tough though. It's gonna be
Okay.
very tight. And without the impeachment, he would have been reelected again, for sure.
We need to have a full conversation on this election. We'll come back next week.
We'll come back.
Dr. Reverend Brother Deacon Dyson.
I'm not a deacon, but a professor.
I was
You got
gonna
three
say,
of
you
them. You got
a
two of
deacon,
them.
huh?
It all fits. I
Not
was
really.
wondering if you would, from your best pulpit, soul-saving oratory, a moment, send us home. We would love to hear you get in the flow for a moment.
Oh, is that right?
Yes, sir.
Oh, wow. Just on the spot. Just drop it, huh? Sure. Usually $100 bills are in the hats.
Yeah.
That, and I get inspired for some reason. No, that's a lie. That's a stone cold lie. They told me to save it for the last 60 seconds is what they've asked me to do. So I'm going to give you some Baptist preacher pugilistic rhetoric at that point. Thank you for that. Where you from? The South? Where you from?
South Carolina.
I could tell it. I could hear that, bruh. I can hear that. See, black Southerners, white Southerners, we got greens, grits, and grace in common. Yeah, I like that.
Professor Jackson, I am a resident of San Francisco, have been for the last 75 years. And like you, I've been, trying to observe what's going on. I'd like to know if you can speak to us about medical racism and the difference between how other people are treated in terms of the opioid crisis and black people.
Yes, sir.
And the fact that here in San Francisco, I believe, in my personal opinion, that this city is more racist than Sun City, South Africa, at the height of apartheid. They
Yeah.
don't like black people, Native Americans, Black Panthers, pit bulls, or men, and I'm all of the above.
Yeah. Well, you just threw it down. I ain't got to add but amen to that. I will briefly say, besides your astonishing eloquence there, that we know right here in this vortex, this liberal vortex, this progressive, right, vortex, that we also saw Free Ray, Ricky Ross, we saw the rise of political economy of crack, we saw what was going on here in the 80s, and there was no sympathy. There was no deep and profound analysis. There was no hospitalization or medicalization of the plague. You're thugs, you are nihilistic, pathological figures who need to be locked away and incarcerated, right? Then you flip it to the opioid addiction, primarily, not though exclusively, with young white brothers and sisters, and even the President of the United States of America. We got to do something for our fellow citizens. We got to figure out a way to solve them. We hospitalize them, we medicalize them, we don't incarcerate them, we don't criminalize them. And what's the difference? We were addicted to. Our young people were addicted to, except they had as the backdrop social immiseration as the immediate fuel for the engine of social despair and crack cocaine addiction, right? And heroin addiction. Whereas opioid, ironically enough, grows from largesse and certain forms of privilege, right? I'm not saying it's altogether true. So the irony is that one is the product of desperation socially, the other one the product of certain forms of privilege, right? Access to drugs, medicalization, and the medical hierarchy. There's no question that we have demonized one and celebrated, or at least been deeply and profoundly empathetic to the other. And it extends medical apartheid. You mentioned in South Africa, it's medical apartheid. The same physical ailments that black and brown people have when they go to the doctor are treated differently than when white brothers and sisters do. They've done so many studies. The same ailment, right? We don't use an ACE inhibitor here. We use X, Y, and Z, right? We don't give as aggressive an intervention, medically speaking, here, because there's a presumption that black people can deal with pain better and that we absorb it. I mean, animalistic, when you said that, not far off in terms of the perception there. So there's no question that that's something that has to be addressed and that needs to be on the political agenda very explicitly so.
Actually going to be right in the back over here.
Oh, okay. Then we'll get up to you, ma'am. There's a person up here, too. Okay.
Yes. I assume you're familiar with Ta-Nehisi Coates and his article in the Atlantic Monthly of a few years ago called The Case for Reparations?
Mm-hmm. Reprinted in his book, We Were 8 Years in Power. Mm-hmm.
And also his letter to his son, Between the World and Me.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, so any comments on any of that?
Great. There's great stuff.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah, I think that, there have been some arguments that he's too hopeless. A lot of white people looking for hope. Hey, help us out. He's like, I ain't got none. I'm a Baptist preacher. I'm a merchant of hope. Prisoner of hope is what I think Howard Thurman called it, right? Howard Thurman said, refuse to scale down your dreams. Howard Thurman was a great prophetic mystic. San Francisco Church for Fellowship of All Peoples, one of the first multiracial churches in America, interracial, right? Great, great figure. And he said, refuse the temptation to scale down your dreams to the event that you are now experiencing, right? Divorce, kids don't obey you, San Francisco 49ers may not make the playoffs as high as you want. Oh, I'm sorry. Y'all do have Garoppolo. So you don't reduce your life to what you're experiencing, because he said the slave foreparents and ancestors, long rows of cotton and the rawhide whip of the overseer lashing against their backs, but they saw something different. They imagined a different future. They had a vision of a different time. And so in that sense, he says, you're going to be a prisoner of the event or a prisoner of hope. And I choose to be a prisoner of hope in that regard. I think the work of, Mr. Coates, Mr. Cobb, Ms. Kaplan out of Los Angeles, these new and young essayists, writers, and thinkers who are challenging us to think critically. Coates is one of a generation, an extraordinary figure, a great, great writer. But there are so many who are now coming up thinking seriously and strategically about that. He writes with extraordinary eloquence and power. His Case for Reparations has really jump-started a conversation about that subsequently, even in the Congress, about what we have to do in order to make a significant difference. So writers can make a huge difference as well. And he's written, and he's admitted that he got the Cosby thing a little bit wrong. He was a little bit more mesmerized by Cosby, but that's understandable. Cosby used to call up journalists, and I think his first piece for the Atlantic, extended piece, was on Cosby. Yeah. And I remember calling him afterwards saying, I think, man, a little bit, because I then wrote a book on Cosby, that, he was dogging, you said you got a different name, and Cosby's like, they named their kids Shaniqua, Taliqua, Muhammad, and all that crap, and they're all in jail. And I said, you might be missing a little bit in terms of the necessary pushback on him, but his father had given him a different perspective about the inherent conservatism of many of these moral and ethical communities that saw Cosby's discourse growing out of that. I took a different route. I wrote an entire book where I tried to challenge that in a serious way. So even though I embrace the power and the beauty of what Coates has done there, we would probably, now we would agree, but even then I had a disagreement about the emphasis and what we must do. But writing is so extremely important, and writers like him inspire us. And when I came into the game, I was on the cover of, what was it? I think it was the New Yorker, where they did a piece on the black intelligentsias in 1994. I think I finished my PhD in 93, right? And now I'm trying to, do this thing these 25 years later. So I feel like Jay in that sense, an old guy with the young people, but I'm trying to hold my own.
Yeah, but you pulled a lot of people through. Yeah, he's been the counselor and advisor for quite a few. You have some seeds in this world.
Thank you, my brother. I appreciate that.
We're taking 2 more questions.
There's a young woman up here who had a question too. You got her? Okay.
Hi, my name is Bernadette Onyanaka. I'm actually currently studying at Georgetown Public Policy, and I'm here in Oakland as a National Urban Fellow. My question is, what do we take from today's conversation in terms of a directive for action? How do we sort of embrace the poetry and the hustle of Jay-Z? I grew up on him. I was in high school when he was really releasing all of his albums at the height of his career. What are we supposed to, how do we then, I guess, internalize what we've heard today, and then what does that mean for us tomorrow as we go back into this world that is increasingly hopeless? As prisoners of hope, what shall we take from this today?
Yes, ma'am. No, that's a great point. You at Georgetown now? Okay, great. Let me say, I remember I was on a panel once. Well, it was just me and Taylor Branch, right? And excuse me. Thank you. And somebody was saying, man, y'all just sit around talking, what you doing? And Taylor Branch responded, he said, King this is what he did, right here, what we doing, right? Because you got to talk it through. You got to be thorough. You got to think about it. Clearly they did action, right? But it was action that was considered and thoughtful and reflective and engaged. And so I think your question points to that necessity. Although just sitting down talking is critical too, because you got to talk the right way. You got to think about these issues the right way. And sometimes by reorienting, like if all you took from this was, hey, maybe with the Colin Kaepernick situation, it's more complicated and nuanced than we thought, and it's not either Jay-Z or Cap, but both and, that's a win. That's an actionable item. That's a reorientation of thought that might make me more open to different strategies of social change, right? That in itself is an intrinsically valuable consideration. But I do got answers, right? I think that there are things we should do. Jay-Z on his album says, I'm trying to give you $1 million of advice for $9.99. And his consideration was generational wealth. He says, he tells a story about, they tried to offer me some stuff, some property in Dumbo. I didn't take it. Now how do I feel? Like a Dumbo, right? He's literally on the record saying, people, invest in real estate, do this, stop spending your money at strip clubs. I'm talking about actionable items. Stop spending ones and singles at a strip club. That's an actionable item. It's not one that the church wants to hear, though many of their members participate. Oh, okay, I'm sorry. I guess y'all didn't want to. Stripping for Jesus. So, I've seen a few there. As I was doing ministry, I go into the highways and the byways. I'm just telling the truth. So, that there are multiple ways to achieve social justice. I think that's extremely important. And B, and the point, and the counter argument that David D. wanted to make, he was just sparing me because he could have destroyed part of that. I think it's important not to be calling people names. And the reason I say this, look, I know people who have less power shout harder. I get that. I'm not, you're right. But the knee-jerk response to defend Malcolm to me is a problem. And I say this as a lover of Malcolm X, right? I say this as a lover because when they defend Malcolm, they're defending their position of name calling, right? Malcolm, he's the worst enemy, right? At what point do I hear people go, you know what? I love Malcolm, he was a great man, but calling King those names was problematic. They will quickly tell you where King was messed up, quickly tell you where strategically he messed up and made a decision. And I've participated in that because I've written 2 books critical of certain elements. But the problem I have with the inability to acknowledge if name calling is the order of the day, we can all do that. And we will get nowhere, right? But let's hold Malcolm accountable, again, not only for the name calling, but wait a minute. You said King is a coward because he put women and children on the front line in Birmingham. Did you go to Birmingham? And if you didn't go to Birmingham, if you said, well, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, that's like saying, hold me back,
Yeah, but
I'm gonna hit you.
Okay.
Let me finish and then you jump in. Okay. Hold me back. Because I would hit you if I could. Now, the rules won't let me do it. Are you kidding me? Then leave the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. If you think that the history, that the future of the race is at stake, and you're criticizing a guy for doing something, for putting women and children in a march, why don't you replace them with men? Why don't you take the Nation of Islam and the Fruit of Islam and go take a train, a boat, a plane, get there if you can, and then, that's an Alida Adams theology, and then arriving there, stand up and say, women and children in the patriarchal culture, a lot of women would have resisted because we are fighters too. So first of all, your patriarchy has to be subverted and challenged because they are freedom fighters too. But they would say, then let those men's bodies then take the place and then begin to challenge it. I know you want to jump in. I'm just saying, if you're going to take the legitimate critique of a Malcolm X, calling it a farce on Washington and chastising King for doing so, what are you willing to do yourself by putting your body on the line to challenge that? But you jump in, Doc. I know you want to challenge it.
The presence of Malcolm is the reason why a lot of things were able to happen because he was, for lack of a better word, he represented a militancy and people who would not turn the other cheek.
Right.
Now, he didn't go down south all the time, but he was on several occasions. He went down there with SNCC and at Selma. He did go to Birmingham. He was at the March on Washington, and he understood his position was to be that foil, that he was going to turn up and was like, you know what, let us work with you because this other guy is going to be problematic. The other thing is that the mindset that he inspired amongst a lot of people, we see that footprint all the way down from the Black Panthers to the Black Arts Movement, a certain type of way in which people dealt with things at a time when people were being crapped on, left and right. So I think over time, the critique of King has softened because we were able to see and understand what he was doing. But I think in 1962 or 1965 or whenever these things were happening, you didn't have all the information. You couldn't just Google, you saw a tactic, which even Coretta talks about, right? Coretta talks about the tactic of saying, look, we're going to allow ourselves to be beaten in front of the world because it's a contradiction to what the United States is standing for. They're telling everybody, forget Russia and forget the Soviet bloc, look at us, and then you have black people being beaten. So she said that was going to be a short-lived, it was a strategy, and I think, King over time came to understand some of that strategy because he did talk with them, but he was also very strategic, I think, in terms of like, look, I'm gonna turn up, I'm gonna say my things. Maybe he shouldn't have called him a name, but I don't think that's the totality of Malcolm X. We can't just put it as
No, I agree with what you said. I'm not, but see, I'm doing unlike what Malcolm was doing in terms of reducing King to an epithet, right? Malcolm didn't go. Malcolm didn't go. Martin Luther King Jr. is doing tremendous work. On this, I disagree with him. He said he's a Tom. That's wholesale. And the reason I'm aggressive about that, because it's bullshit when it comes to trying to, I do see the consequences of Malcolm, and I see some of the negative consequences. The name calling, the willingness to think you're more righteous than the other, to think that you have a patent on blackness, to think that your particular variety of blackness is the only legitimate one. And furthermore, wait a minute, hold on. What law did Malcolm change? No, hold on.
Okay.
What law? Wait a minute, because we live under law.
Right,
The
right.
Civil Rights Bill, 1964.
If Malcolm's not
wait a
there,
minute,
there's no
let me
civil
finish
rights,
this.
there's no-
Civil Rights
okay.
Bill 64, the Voting Rights 1965, and Malcolm X, you know, the Fair
Listen,
Housing Act in 1968.
listen.
I'm telling you, the laws were changed. For a guy who was a sellout, who was seen as a Tom, I'm suggesting merely that Martin Luther King Jr. engaged in serious reconstruction of society that was far more revolutionary than a black man calling white people names or black people names without having
No,
substantive social transformation.
That aspect.
That's all I'm saying.
That
That's all I'm saying.
that aspect played a critical role
We can boo.
in
I don't
terms
mind.
of.
I don't mind.
That aspect played a critical role in terms of the choices that people had. You know, it took, what, 7 years for laws to get changed. Not something that he went and advocated for, per se. It was like, okay.
Which one? What
Well,
do you mean?
what I'm saying is, okay, you had in 64, 63, the Civil Rights Act.
Right, 64.
Right? But remember, a lot of these, the impetus for that was the strategy that was employed by taking these to court cases.
Right.
Right? So that's
Thurgood Marshall.
Right, Thurgood Marshall.
But the Nation of Islam forbade strict political involvement.
Right,
They
but
had
the
no
nation,
political involvement.
but the Nation of Islam set up and had their own business and was self-sufficient, and that became.
I ain't mad at that, but if you got a business in a segregated society, you selling to other black people. When you integrate the society because you have a possibility now of getting some of the largest that you pay your tax money into, that's a different strategy. That's a revolutionary strategy. And I'm saying, look, Malcolm X was a great man, but he was a flawed man. And the criticisms he had of King, if we could understand how flawed they were then to now, and let's be real, Malcolm X became a national figure right near the end of his life in terms of his national portfolio and presence. He didn't exercise that much influence where the white people went, oh my God, if we don't deal with Martin Luther King Jr., we have to deal with Malcolm X. That's what he told.
I totally disagree with that.
I'm just telling you what I'm just saying
yeah.
that when he went to Selma,
Right.
where Dr. King was in jail, and he told Mrs. King that's right before he dies.
Right.
I'm saying once he frees himself, once he leaves the Nation of Islam and he becomes an independent political agent, he has much more flexibility to be able to exercise his
Right,
political
but you
muscle.
can't-
That's 1 year
Yeah.
before he
Okay,
dies.
Okay,
We got it. Okay.
we need to come back and do this.
I would love to do. All I'm just saying is calling names is a funky thing, and the dudes whose name you calling transform the ability for us to sit
We
here
all transform.
more than
We're
others.
all transformed.
No doubt
I mean,
about
because
that.
King,
Some more than others.
the militancy. I'll say this: the militancy that was adapted by SNCC is one of the things that comes out of Malcolm. Right? The stances that he took inspires Kwame Ture. I've done interviews where
Right,
he's
right.
talked about that, right?
Right.
So, you know, James Foreman and all that, a lot of that is Malcolm, and they push King in many of those instances.
No doubt. But
Okay.
I'm telling you, King was much more. What I'm arguing is that King is far more militant and revolutionary than Malcolm
I
X.
think we all agree with that. Now, yeah,
Right.
hindsight is 20/20, but at
Well,
the time,
well,
at the time, we, you know.
But now that we have the ability, let's stop doing the same stuff Malcolm did, which is calling folk names when you disagree with them. That's all I'm saying.
We
I'm
have
just
one
saying
more
for
audience question.
Oh, I'm sorry.
This is
Yeah,
our
yeah.
last one.
What? Not the audience. Not the audience.
I'll just preface my question with, I think we needed both of them just the way they were. So that's my comment.
Also, with the name calling too. With the name
Well,
calling too.
I think that they,
With name calling too. So if I called you a name right now, you'd be good with that.
Yeah, but SNCC,
Yes, that's what I said.
SNCC and SALC had their skirmishes.
Let's let her. Okay.
I'm not qualified.
We hijacking your
Okay,
question now.
sorry about that.
Because if I call you,
I'm not qualified to debate with you. I'm just going to admit that. But
No.
let me say this. With respect to the hustle,
Yes,
okay, I like the discussion about the hustle and that it's all American. But the all American hustle has gotten so extreme and so individualistic that it's just all about your hustle. And it's resulted in the conditions that you see right here in San Francisco and in Oakland of extreme homelessness. And I want to know, why is that not on the top of every single agenda, especially the progressive Democratic agenda in the Democratic-dominated California legislature and governor's office. Why isn't that the #1 thing that we are talking about here in California and around the country?
That being a reference to
Homelessness.
homelessness. That too. Well, they've been locked out of those unions, and the prevention of black flourishing in these unions is a strategy that Richard Nixon deployed to try to break affirmative action, right? It's not that he was for black people. He figured if I break these white unions and introduce affirmative action, it'll make them pissed and it'll break their authority, and therefore his political base would be secured. Look, there's no question that homelessness is such a huge problem, and that a certain ethic of hustling that you so eloquently speak about is at fault. Although when we look at it, when we look at McDougall, when he talks about hustling at the heart of America, the negative meaning of that hustle has always been individualistic. It's always been about me versus them, right? It's always been about how I can get over. It's always been about how I can extract serious social gain from a situation, game on some people, scheme on them, and maximize my own individual accumulation of wealth, or the possibility that I could get over on an entire group of people. So I think in that sense, there's certainly a way in which that hustle has been negative and deleterious from the very beginning, and we would do well to try to chastise those who would embody that. That's why, in an offhanded way, I mentioned the guy in the White House right now. I don't think we've seen a greater hustler, in the negative sense of that word, than that guy right there, right? Literally using, along with Rudy Giuliani, America's mayor, right? Hustling hard in some of the most negative fashions. And of course, the homeless situation will be exacerbated. The homelessness problem, along with the housing problem, ironically enough, those without homes, those without houses, and those who, as a result of what James Baldwin talked about as urban renewal, which is Negro removal, he said, and the way in which gentrification becomes its proxy in our own day and age. So partly, and then when you throw in what are the exacerbating influences of homelessness, and we know mental health is one of the critical barriers that prevents people from enjoying the possibility of holding on to their homes. Now, that's exacerbatory effect, because we know already people at the lower end of the totem pole, those who are poor, those who are working poor, who can barely hold on to their homes, when you got the housing bubble that burst, and when you got the fact that the greatest bleed off of black wealth in the history of this country happened within our own, in the last 10 years. And when that bleed off of wealth occurred, we haven't been able to recuperate it yet. So when Obama came into office and trying to hook the banks up, which is what I'm sure he had to do it. Can you imagine the first black president allowing the banks to fail? He'd have been impeached the next week. Right, he'd have been gone. Right, if Obama had a white Russian drink in the White House, he would have been impeached. Now we got a guy drinking with a white Russian. Come on, I'm just trying, Making extraneous gases, just Putin all day. So the thing is that if we deal with the downturn in the economy, the housing bubble that burst, the bleed off of black and brown, but mostly black wealth, and then the veterans crisis around, right, both medical treatment and mental illness and the broader impact of mental illness, then yes, homelessness is an offshoot of and a symptom of those troubles that have not been addressed. They are organic and they are interrelated, and not addressing the one means that we don't address the others.
To make your answer to that a little bit more simple, here we are in a solidly blue state, right? There is no far right that needs to be catered to. Yet you have over 40 million people here. You have the 7th largest economy in the world that's here. So those who have power have figured out how to get in bed with or have folks get in bed with developers, with folks who are making these decisions. And the difficulty is that many of these folks are black and brown faces who have what I call cultural capital, meaning that they listen to Jay-Z. You know, they can do, you know, the Cabbage Patch or whatever dance is happening, right? They have that, so it becomes very difficult to see them as an enemy, where they go, black man, we need, you know, it's not really as bad as you think. Sister, what you need to do is you need to maybe buy a house and get into these subprime loans. Remember all the people that were redirected to subprimes and then lost their homes in 1987, in 2007, 2008. A lot of that was folks who, in many ways, as Dr. Dyson said, they hustled on their own. Like, I got mine, get yours. And so we're dealing with that now, the after effects. I mean, I'm in the city of Oakland. There's a lot of folks that are not trying to hear this. You know, you're sitting there going, look at these folks who don't have homes. And we're not talking about the folks that we see in the street. We're talking about the people that are living in cars. You come on my block, there's tons of people living in cars. Somebody makes a decision to say, we're gonna sweep these cars on out of here. They don't disappear. They're not going to San Ramon or Danville. They're just going to another part of Oakland. And so now we're at a point where we are acting like they don't exist. And I'll say this, there's going to be an explosion. I mean, all the crime we're seeing, why didn't I bring my car here? Because people are gonna break into it. Right? Why are they breaking into it? Because there's a desperation. You know, they're not going to be punished. And you also have people who look and they say, you got a Prius, you're one of them people that displaced me. Lastly, there was a lot of tax breaks that were given from Twitter on down. They came here with the promise that they were going to trickle down and make sure that everybody had something to eat. Well, you go south the market where Twitter's at, and you see a whole lot of people with nothing to eat, but they got that tax break. So where did the money go? So, you know, we're looking at folks who have a D next to their name that made these decisions. And since he was talking about hard truth, that's a hard truth that we're gonna have to reconcile with, you know, because it ain't Donald Trump and his people. We're talking about dyed-in-the-wool Democrats that would sit up here and say, you need to vote for me in 2020, who are sitting on, this homelessness is on their watch in a solidly blue state, and that's hard for a lot of people to accept. You got the last word, Mr. Dyson. They want to know how you gonna make this world a better place.
I'm going to elect you as at least the governor of the state. I think that would be a hell of a move to begin with. Look, I think the reason I've spent so much time about Malcolm versus Martin, it's not just an ideological debate, it's about a tone. We're living in a country that is so vicious and nasty. We disagree with each other and we have to kill each other. We have to hurt and harm each other. We have to insist that the other is the devil incarnate. And there are some instances when we have to be quite vigorous and aggressive about decrying the evils that we see. But in the meantime, we are flawed human beings trying to make a difference in a world that we have helped to create. Partly we have inherited it, and we want to leave a better world to our children. So I think open dialogue and serious engagement and talking with people with whom we agree or disagree, and restoring a civic trust, a civic piety that allows us to magnify the better aspects of our American nature is the only thing that can save us. And then when all of our communities, the lesbian, gay, transgender, bisexual, those who are marginal because of their ethnicity or race, African American, Latinos, people who happen to be marginal because of their economic status, which is vulnerable because of mental health issues, in a country where we've got so much wealth and we're flowing in it, as David D. has just indicated, even ironically, perhaps even paradoxically enough, in a state like California, what we are at a deficit in is an empathy deficit that helps us understand the other. And if we can arrive at that particular position, not in a namby-pamby, we are the world kind of way, but in a way that looks hard and fast at the truths that we confront, and then give the other the very willingness to concede the legitimacy of another way to become better as ours, maybe together we could pool our resources, think critically together about how to make this world a better place, and be introspective and self-critical. Take what you do with deadly seriousness, but don't take yourself too seriously at all. That's where I would end that.
You notice he didn't preach. You were supposed to do that preach stuff.
Now, you know, that's the.
That was good?
That was good.
Okay.
That
Yeah,
was
okay.
good. All right.
I like when Mike rhymes. You know, Mike be having flows.